Hi, I'm Steve McCord, Cattaraugus County Director of Veteran Services, and this is Our Veterans, Their Stories, preserving our heroes' stories, one story at a time.
I graduated high school in Springville, New York in 1984. Basically, I went in the Marine Corps. What attracted me to the Marine Corps was it was shortly after the Beirut bomb. The Marine barracks got bombed in Beirut in 1983. I saw a clip on the nightly news that they were interviewing Marines that were there in foxholes, and it was around Christmas time, and they were talking to these Marines and interviewed a Marine, and they asked him, "Well, how do you feel about being away from your family during the holidays?" And the funny thing was, what he said was, "I'm not away from my family. I'm with my family, my Marine family." And for some reason, that really, I mean, to this day, I say it, I get goosebumps. And it really stuck in my head. And my father and all his brothers were in the service. They all served, one in the Army and two in the Navy. And once I graduated in '84, I had figured, I don't know, I felt an obligation, even though there was nothing going on right at that time. I just felt an obligation that that I should do something different, get away from the area and see what it's all about. So, of course, I went in and talked to the Marine Corps recruiter in Hamburg, and I signed up to be a 0811, which is a cannon cocker, and then 0311, which is an infantryman, and then a 1300, which is an engineer. And then I was off to Paris Island, and reported to, actually it was the first week of, or the last week of December when I signed up of '84. The following week I left, which was 1985, January. And I guess I'm I'm kind of different. I didn't want to know much about it. I figured the less I knew, the better it would be, because I didn't have any preconceived notions of what to expect, which in turn didn't make me as scared. But arriving at Paris Island at 2, 3 in the morning on the bus, and then all heck broke loose with the drill instructors and get on the yellow footprints, and they lined us up in front of these sinks. Must have been 7 or 8 of them, and there was one razor on each sink for all the Marines or all the recruits that were coming in. You shaved with one razor. You shaved clean. If you hadn't shaved clean, you're shaving. Guys would come out of there just bleeding all over, and that was the next razor. Would go same razor. We just shaved. Thank God I listened to my recruiter and shaved, so it wasn't too painful. Boot camp was very eye-opening, intense. I figured the best way to get through it was do everything that I was told to do when I was told to do it and how I was told to do it. And I mean, everybody screws up. Paris Island in January, believe it or not, there's a lot of sand fleas and heat down there, even in the wintertime. So dealing with the sand fleas and yelling and screaming, and it didn't really dawn on me until I was on my way home, I think, from boot camp, that everything that they did to you or you did had a reason behind it. I mean, we sat left over right all the time. If we had a class, anything, it was on the deck, and we sat left and right, left over right. Well, nobody understood it. But what that was doing was it was preparing you for the rifle range. So when you go onto the rifle range and you're in the sitting position, you've been doing that sitting since day one, so you're a little bit more limber and stretched out. And these things don't come to you at the time. And I shot well. I shot sharpshooter on the range, and that was a big thing for me because I just wanted to qualify, and I did better than I thought. And after that was rappelling, where you jump off the tower, and that was a scary moment. But they really don't give you a lot of chance to think about it once you're on the skid. They got a simulated skid of a helo. It's pretty much you strap up to your harness and your Swiss seat. You tie your own seat, and next thing you know, by the time you're hooked up, they're pushing you off. So just to keep everybody going, and that was one of those times where you're scared at the beginning, but once it's over, you're like, can I go back and do that again? Because it was that fun. So boot camp ended in March of 1985. It was 3 months. And from there, they don't tell you where you're going or what your orders are. Now, like I said, I signed up for cannon cocker, infantry, and engineer. Well, the recruiter had mentioned something to me right after I swear before I got on the airplane about them needing engineers. But see, in my mind, I thought everybody was a grunt no matter what. I thought everybody's going to be a grunt. And after humping that pack and the weapon and all that for so long, and I was like, oh, now I got to do this for 4 more years. Well, it turned out actually, I got orders to it was actually petroleum school, bulk fuel school. It was part of the engineers, but it was at Fort Lee, Virginia, we trained on an Army base with the Marine Corps riggers. They were there too with the Army training, and we were there about 3 months and learned the ins and outs of tactical fueling and some commercial fueling. I was in Fort Lee, Virginia, right outside Richmond. And from there, I got orders to Okinawa. And I went to 9th Engineers in Okinawa. And our amount of fuel time, or working with fuel, was absolutely non-existent. We were basically grunts. I never learned a thing about fuel. I mean, we threw grenades. We would northern training area in Okinawa, central training area in Okinawa. Everything was about rappelling up in Okinawa. We did a lot of infantry type training, more so than anything to do with fuel. So I was there from July of '85 to December of '85. Now, a lot of people, here's something that I say. A lot of people, the first thing they hear when you want to go into the service is don't volunteer for anything. Everybody's heard that. Well, I was just the opposite. I wanted to change. I wanted to do something different all the time. I mean, I was hard to be just static. So I was stationed at Camp Hansen, in Okinawa, which is the second farthest northern base. And they asked for volunteers one day in formation, and I think I went over as a private. I didn't do anything special to get promoted ahead of time, and so I was a private. And so I volunteered. I picked up Lance Corporal, E3, and I volunteered for whatever it was that they didn't even tell us what it was. I just volunteered. Well, they pulled us in the office, and they told us, well, you're going to Marine Corps Air Station Fatima, which is a southern base down toward Naha and Kadena Air Base. It's in between Naha and Kadena. And up to then, we lived in like, they were cement Quonset huts. And 2 men, it wasn't even a room, it was an open squad bay. And we had a curtain with a piece of comm wire running across to give you a little bit of privacy. Other than that, the only thing that separated you and the guy next to you was the wall lockers. And anyhow, when we got there, I saw real barracks. These were 3-story barracks, and we had 3 to 4 men in a room. And I was just like blown away, because after living in a Quonset hut where it's cement floors, community showers, community heads, everything. This was like you had your own head, you had your own shower, but you shared it with 3 guys. But anyway, it didn't matter. I was open for the new experience. So anyway, hot refueling. Finally started getting into the fuel side of the house now, and there's 2 types of fueling of aircraft. Cold refueling, which is with the engines shut off and the power shut off, and there's hot refueling, which is with the engines running and the props running, and that's a pretty dangerous job. Well, I worked in the fuel pits for maybe not quite a year, I don't think, and I got bumped up to drive tanker and do cold refueling, which was great because I got my commercial license. Started out at Jeep school, had to go to Jeep school and get my license in order to get my tanker license, and did all that. Got my tanker license. One thing that I want to say is it was odd because I was working for a ABFC, Aviation Boatswain's Mates Fuels Chief, in the Navy. He was a Navy E7, and Chief Burchard was his name. He was to this day, probably one of the best service people that I was ever really around. I mean, he really took the time to make sure you understood what was going on. He had more knowledge than anybody about fuel. And I ended up staying over there till 1988. I just kept extending. I extended twice. It was a good, we worked 24 hours on, 24 hours off, refueling around the clock. Everything from Hueys, Cobras, C-130s, 46s, 53s. Did a lot of Air Force, did the Commandant's Birds, did the SR-71 Black Hawk, all the fighter aircraft you could think of. I've done them all. I've refueled them all. And it was really a turning point for me because it was more of a constant job. Whereas in the engineers, you're doing all kinds of stuff that had nothing to do with fuel. So this was great for me. I mean, I learned a lot. We pumped JP4 and refueled all night long. And it was a really great experience for me to have a good leader like himself. And I had a first sergeant by the name of First Sergeant Lenny Garamone. And he was a grunt. And what he did was he got frocked, which means he got moved up to first sergeant before his actual time. Anyway, to come from the grunts and go to the air wing like that was, to see him as a role model was awesome. Because once he got with the air wing, then his next move was, I'm going to get my crew wings. He didn't care if he was a grunt or not. He was going to take advantage of every opportunity, no matter what he threw at him. And he was a great leader. He believed in playing hard and working hard. And I think he sent me, I was in the Philippines twice, Korea 3 times, I believe, Osan Air Base, and Clark Air Base, and QB Point out of the Philippines. And because that first sergeant would hook us up, if you had $200 in your pocket and they had a C-130 going to Korea, he'd call all the units. You got $200 in your pocket? We got a flight leaving tonight at 1800. Guess what? I always kept money on me. So I spent a lot of, overseas, traveling around in those places, and that was awesome. Just awesome. And it didn't charge you to leave for it. So he made up TAD orders, and you go for 3 days, a week, whatever. And anyway, that had to be around 1986. The Olympics were over in Seoul around that time. Anyhow, I ended up staying there till 1988, and my first sergeant talked to me. I re-enlisted, and my first sergeant talked me into going on embassy duty. Now, I didn't know much about embassy duty at the time, but I trusted my first sergeant, and he said, you got to do so. I was a corporal now. By now, I got meritoriously promoted, 18 months in the Corps, and I got with, I had to go through all the screening, fingerprinting. There's a lot, too, going on embassy duty. Basically, you're working for the State Department out of Arlington, Virginia, and the Marine Corps. So you got 2 chains of command. Well, the school's in Quantico. So I left Okinawa around late November, December. I got 30 days leave in preparation for embassy school, which was also known as MSG school, Marine Security Guard School. So if I say that means the same as embassy duty. And the school was 3 months long, and that was in Quantico. And a lot of the stuff that we learned there was, we had State Department instructors, we had Marine instructors. Of course, weapons was a big thing. We learned how to field strip AK-47s. We qualified back then with 357 Magnums, 870P riot shotguns. Those were required to graduate. Customs and courtesies, especially how to handle diplomats, because you were going to become a diplomat, and halfway through, they do an interview with you one-on-one with, well, not one-on-one, 1 on 5 or 6. They had the chaplain, the shrink, the senior instructors of the school, and they grill you with questions to see, if you were. It was just part of the course. You PT'd a lot. PT, we run sit-ups, pull-ups. You had to run 2 or 3 PFTs. I was really in shape at the time. I was really good at running, and I had practiced a lot before I went, running a lot before I went back to the stateside to Quantico. So I was in good shape. There was a lot of, like I said, how to deal with dignitaries, how to do riots, how to control a riot, how to control a bomb threat, what to do, how to look, how to search, how to do takedowns on people. We had the PR-24, which is nightstick with the handle on it. We had to be certified on that. They gassed us, of course. We had to use State Department gas masks. They gassed us, and everything is, everybody's got to do it because you're carrying mace. You have to understand what it's like to be. Well, we'd all been gassed a million times in the Corps. That's part of the annual training, so it was no big deal. But it was a very formal type school where it was the first time I'd been to a school where you would sit at a long table, and you were broken down into squads, and you would go to class in a squad, and then the next day, one or two people were not there anymore. And you didn't really understand what was going on. Is what happens is they start your background investigation. NCIS starts it, Naval Criminal Investigative Service starts it before you even get overseas or stateside. And what would happen was a lot of the stuff didn't catch up to the people till they were at the school. Maybe you had a financial issue, you were divorced, impending problem, anything, they would just disappear. And they'd weed them out based on that kind of stuff. So you started out with maybe 175 people, and you graduated maybe. It was an 80% attrition rate at the school. So I don't know what we graduated, 75, 80 people, and so once that school was over, I graduated. They came up to me on an inspection. Oh, one thing we were on the pistol range, and they called me back to the rear. And I was like, oh, geez, what'd I do? And I had to wait in line to go in and see the shrink, the medical psychologist, psychiatrist, whatever you want to call him. And when I went in, I sat down, and he started grilling me with questions from my religion to my background of traveling inside the United States, if I did, and a bunch of personal questions. And basically, once that was over, he asked me, his name was Doc Sherman, he asked me, do I have any questions? And I said, yes, sir. I said, what am I doing here? He said, well, you've been chosen to go to a criteria country, which basically I knew what it was, kind of. It was a country that was in some type of turmoil. And I said, oh, well, in school, that's a feather in your cap, because they have enough faith and confidence in you to send you someplace like that. And it was also a non-frat post where I ended up going my first embassy. My first embassy that I went to was Damascus, Syria. They asked me if I wanted to go to Moscow, and it was shortly after an incident with a Marine Guard over there, and had to be 88. And I said, I'd prefer to go to Beirut, and rather than go to Moscow, because I didn't want to be looking over my shoulder all the time. Well, Beirut closed, and I guess they got me as close as they could because I was in Syria. I worked we worked at the embassy there, and the embassy guard's duties and responsibilities are to provide security for the embassy and the DCM, which is Deputy Chief of Mission, who's like the under ambassador, and to allow access and entrance to the embassy, as well as be prepared for any type of action that might be taken against us. So we were fully loaded we had more firepower, and I think there was 5 of us and a deck commander who was a staff sergeant. Well, we had 357s, 870P riot shotguns. We actually had Uzis, 9mm. We had shotguns that could fire grenades. So we had a lot of... the hostages had been released prior to us that they held over in Lebanon at the time. They had been released before us, but they had executed a couple. There's a big UN faction over there that drives up and down the Golan Heights with flags, but they're unarmed United Nations people, and they had captured a lieutenant colonel who happened to be a Marine and executed him. And they sent his body through us at the American Embassy, and we had means of putting it. You know, we had equipment for just something like that to happen. So we took care of that. Jimmy Carter came over and visited him and his wife, and there was a lot of tension between Syria and Beirut at the time, and he wanted to go over there because, if you recall, he was a big advocate in the Middle East at the time. Well, he didn't give anybody heads up. He just thought he could go over there. Well, ended up they had to get on the hot phone and call back to the States and tell them, no, it wasn't going to happen. But we had a big, we did a lot of what you would call dog and pony shows for different ambassadors. Anytime there was anything at the ambassador's residence, we were always there on show, I guess you'd say. And so Damascus was it was a non-frat tour, and then it's not like, meaning you can't fraternize with the local people. So there was really nothing for Marines to do. We lived right inside the compound of the embassy, and the embassy was all double concertina wired with sheet metal going off the roofs so nobody could grab a hold and climb up. Plus it was behind walls that had metal grating going all the way up. So it opened my eyes to a lot to see Assad, who was the, I guess you call him I don't know what you call him, president or king of Syria at the time, whatever. His son now runs the country, but he was the evil emperor that lived up on the mountain in some kind of mansion. But the people, the people were eating out of dumpsters. You know, it was my first experience to see that type of way of living, I guess you'd say. There was no McDonald's, there's no Pizza Hut, there's none of that kind of stuff. And you don't dare eat outside. Our food was all flown in from an Air Force base in Insular, Turkey. And we used to have to drive to Turkey to pick it up and bring it back. So that's how we got our food. And anything you ate that was local was soaked in bleach and water, vegetables and stuff like that. Then from there, that was a year tour because it was a hardship tour. From there, I had a wish list, and which normally doesn't mean much. I ended up, my next post was Bangkok, Thailand, which was 1990, I believe. And beautiful country, awesome people, a lot of great liberty. But then the first Gulf War broke out. So then things started turning toward their focus on the Americans and the American embassy, because we just, of all the places you would think, Thailand became, because it's such a mixture of people. There's so many different types of people, nationalities, Europeans, Africans. There's a lot of different types of people that walk around that you don't know or that could do anything at any time. So we had some threats. And so it was my birthday. I had worked day shift. I was planning on going out and celebrating that night. Well, didn't work out that way. There was a bomb threat called into the ambassador's house. And that was across it was a beautiful embassy in Thailand, very big. And we lived inside that compound as well. We had our own house. We had our own cooks. We had our own laundry people. And so we went through, basically, I'm thinking as I'm going through, afterwards we're all suited up. We had bomb gear on, and we're going through the ambassador's house. Now, you have to go through every inch of the house. I mean, we went through his bedroom, his drawers, everywhere, because you don't know. And I'm thinking it didn't even dawn on me till halfway through, geez, what if I get blown up on my birthday? That would be something. Anyway, thank God we didn't find anything and nothing happened. But we did have threats, and I'm sure you're all aware there's certain agencies in every American embassy. I won't go into too much on that because I don't know if I should, but they deal with these types of people with the information and try to get the information from them. Then it comes to us, and then we act on it. Now, up top side of that embassy, and the one in every embassy has a bubble up top in a secured area where it's totally soundproof. And that's where we have our classified discussions and weekly meetings and find out what's going on in the country. I'll say this, that sticks with me to this day. I'd never seen an actual hanging until I was in, it was actually Syria. Not to go back, but I actually got, I don't want to say got to, it wasn't really a privilege, but I saw 3 people get hung, and that really stuck with me. But anyway, Thailand, we held up in the embassy because of some threats for 2 or 3 days. But other than that, Bangkok was awesome. It had its own commissary right on base. We didn't need to go shopping. We go right to the commissary and buy groceries for all the Marines. And after 18 months there, I had only had maybe a little bit over a year left on my second contract. I decided, I'll roll the dice and go for a third embassy. And chances are it's not going to go where you want to go. And I got off duty. I worked night shift from midnight till 7 or 8. And then I got the call that I was going to South America. And I had a map over my rack. And the country I went to was called Suriname, Paramaribo, Suriname. It's down on the South American tip of South America. It's on near French Guyana. And I didn't get leave. I flew directly from Thailand to Miami, Florida, where I had to wait to get a visa. I waited a week to get a visa, got the visa. They have one airplane in that country. So it was, you had to wait until, the plane would usually break down. So I spent about 2 weeks in Miami, just State Department hooked me up with a beautiful place real close to the airport. And 2 weeks later, I found myself down there. And you've heard of third world countries. Well, this one must be a fourth or fifth world country. There's pretty much nothing there that you can eat or, it's another one of them types of deals where our food came from Panama, I believe, by cargo plane. And I stayed there a year. That country had just been taken over by another, by the military. So there was a coup there. But there was never actually anything that went on and that would cause us to be deployed or anything like that in that country. We lived away from the embassy about 2 miles, and we had drivers and everything. We weren't allowed to drive because case of an international incident. They didn't want us. So we had drivers that took us back and forth to the embassy, and we did a lot of training drills and stuff like that. And my time rolled around to the end, and I ended up re-enlisting. The ambassador re-enlisted me. And now I was on my way to 29 Palms, California, which surprised me. But I was never one that really cared where I went. I had been majority of my first 7.5 years were overseas. So I hadn't been stationed too many bases in the States. So I didn't really care that I was going to the middle of the desert, 29 Palms. And if you know anything about it, it's one of the largest bases we have, just based on the land mass alone. And well, I was assigned to a fuels division out there that we supported the CACs, which is the Combined Arms Exercises. Every ground unit, artillery unit, fighter bomber unit uses the airfield. Well, we were out there and fueling the aircraft. Once one unit left, another unit rolled right in behind. They were literally waiting to come in and do their 3-month stint. Well, I was permanent personnel, so there was no getting out of the desert. I was there. And to be honest with you, I enjoyed it. A lot of people didn't like it. They claimed, there wasn't a lot to do, but I had no problem. I got a house off base because I had just come back from embassy duty. I rented a place. They allowed me to do that because I had so much, accumulated so much stuff after being overseas. So I lived out in town there. Somalia kicked up in 93, I believe, or 92 maybe. And give up my apartment, give away all my food. We got the call on a Friday night to be legal in the morning to fill out wills, and TMO was coming to the barracks or the houses and packing all your stuff up. So I went to the realtor, finished my contract with him, sold all my possessions that I didn't need. The rest they put in storage. Turned off the phone, the electric, the gas, all that kind of stuff. And we got on buses the next morning. The chaplain come down and said a prayer for us. And drove down to Camp Pendleton to board the planes. We get there, we didn't even get off the bus. And they told us they didn't need us. So now we turned around and we're on our way back. Now, anyway, I had nowhere to go now because I had given everything away. But that was just one of the things while we were there that was nerve-wracking. It's Marine Corps motto, hurry up and wait, and every one of us wanted to go. We were all volunteers. And after that, stayed there. I got orders for DI school, drill instructor school. And I was stationed at Marine Corps Recruit Training Depot. I went to school there, to DI school, Marine Corps Recruit Training Depot, San Diego, California, which I had never been to because when I went to boot camp, it was Parris Island. Didn't realize that they had a boot camp in San Diego till I met other Marines in the Corps who had been there. I never could even imagine. So anyway, I didn't really care which one I went to. I ended up going to San Diego. I reported Easter Sunday of 1994. I was a staff sergeant. I got promoted to staff sergeant at this time. I got promoted to sergeant while I was on embassy duty. So I picked up my staff sergeant and I went right down to school. And of course I was running 2 times a day and in the heat and just trying to get my body used to what I thought was coming and what I knew was coming. And I did good and went to the school. School was 3 months. Now, I'm a staff sergeant, an old Salt E6. They treat you just like a recruit at the schoolhouse. I can remember walking into the schoolhouse with my orders and standing with my arms on my hands on my hips or my arms folded, I can't remember. And a staff sergeant that was an instructor there jumped my ass. And, what do you think, you're a drill instructor already? Get your arms off. You can't be standing like that. I'm like, oh, wow. Well, everything was recruit style. We had like 16 shower heads in the room, and we'd PT 2 times a day. So you get done with PT, and you got 80 guys trying to jam into a shower room and be dressed and in the classroom in, 15 minutes. And you're still sweating when you get in there, so you learn to take cold showers so you don't perspire. But anyway, the schooling went on. I graduated, and I was assigned to 3rd Recruit Training Battalion, Mike Company. And that's, it's funny because as I was a recruit, I was assigned to 3rd Recruit Training Battalion in Paris Island, Lima Company, or India Company, excuse me. And so you do, basically, I'll hold this up and show you, give you an example. This is my award that I was given upon completion of my my tour of duty on the drill field. And the green belt is what the junior drill instructor wears. He's the new guy, or what you consider they call the heavy. He teaches a lot. He does all the drill. He teaches the recruits all the knowledge that they need to learn. He does all the dirty work, everything. This belt is a senior drill instructor belt, which is in charge of all the green belts. Now, I pushed 3 platoons as a green belt and 4 platoons as a black belt in 2 years. So that's 21 months out of those two years that I pushed over 600 recruits and trained. When I say push, I mean I trained them. And probably one of the most fulfilling duties I'd ever done in my life. Most demanding and most satisfying, based on the fact that you're turning civilians into finely honed, physically fit, basically trained Marines. But that doesn't come very easy. It's very difficult. The school, like I said, they run you through the school with the mentality of just like a recruit. And once again, going back to what I said, everything has a reason. Well, you may have been out of boot camp 10 years like I had been, but going through the school refreshed my whole memory of everything all over again. And we did exactly everything the recruits would do, everything, except we were staff sergeants and sergeants, and but what it did was refresh you on how that recruit's going to feel when he's doing it, because you yourself went through it twice, counting DI school. So by the time I finished, and I did very well down there. I won the Moral Achievement Award back to back, and Navy Achievement Medal. I wrote a SOP for senior drill instructors. And toward the end of my time, where I already had orders, I got Battalion Sergeant Major wanted to see me. Now, I'm not going to say I wasn't pretty hands-on as a drill instructor, because I was very hands-on. And when you get a call to go to the first sergeant or sergeant major, it's probably something you did that's going to come back to bite you, which happened to me a lot, but fortunately I always pushed the edge of the envelope and came out on the good side. And I get to the battalion sergeant major, and they want me to stay and go to be an instructor at drill instructor school. Well, I walked across the grinder, the parade deck. Sergeant Major wasn't in his office. Well, I had already called my wife, and of course she had a good job in San Diego, and she's like, I said, what do you think? And she says, just like she always did with everything in the Corps, you do what you want to do. That was her answer. So I was stuck with making the decision. Well, when I walked across the parade deck and the sergeant major wasn't in his office, I said, that's a sign. I'm not staying. So I had orders then to Cherry Point, North Carolina, which was an awesome base. And it worked out of, I was assigned to a Marine Wing Support Squadron out of Cherry Point. We supported, we had what was, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the term EAF, Expeditionary Airfield. Have you ever seen any of the matting, AM2 matting? They can be put together, an airfield can be established, it's like a puzzle. You put it together with 6 and 4 foot pieces, and you got a runway. Of course, it's graded and leveled, and then you put the matting down, and that becomes a tactical airfield. Well, what we did was, there's a small base from Cherry Point called Marine Corps Auxiliary Landing Field, Bogue. It's between Camp Lejeune and Cherry Point. Well, it was set up like the deck of a flight carrier, like a aircraft carrier, where it had a tower just like you would on a ship. It had the markings on the deck, and we supplied the tactical fuel systems for them, because they would do the forward arming and refueling points. They'd arm, they'd fuel, and then they go right back up. It was more of a training for the pilots, because they would fly 2-seater Aviate-B Harriers, and awesome job. Loved every minute of it. That was all tactical. It was all rubber hose, 4-inch, 2-inch rubber hose, 600-gallon-a-minute pumps. Did that, and I stayed there for quite a while. I was in charge of the fuel farm out there. When I had to go to a conference, I got a call to go to a bulk fuel engineer conference up in Quantico, and just so happened the head of the fuel school was part of the board that I was with to design the new SOP for the fuels, or the TM manual. We were rewriting the technical manual. And I had a lot of knowledge with that stuff, so of course I had a lot of input. It couldn't have been 2 months after I got back. I get a phone call. I'm out on the flight line. I come running in. It's this chief warrant officer from the schoolhouse. Now, I'm a master sergeant, or gunny at this time. And he wanted me to come to the schoolhouse and be an instructor. Now, I had been on embassy duty. I had been on DI duty. I gave briefings and classes to Commandant of the Chilean Marines. I used to give briefings to all the Lions Club, all the people that lived around the airfield. And they'd have to give a lot of lectures and classes on the fuel system, because we had to explain to the people, we were right off the coast, and they're beachfront community people. With the Harriers, they're so loud. The people needed to understand why we were training. And the best way to do it was bring them on by the busload, and then you'd have to explain everything that we did, so they had a better perspective of why you were actually making all that noise. And we had a sign outside the gate that said, "Excuse our noise, it's a sound of freedom," which was awesome. But so I got a call to go to the schoolhouse to be an instructor. And by time I had a year and a half left. I might have been a master sergeant, I can't recall at the time. I got promoted to master sergeant on April Fool's Day of 2004. I had waited such a long time. Well, by then, in order to take that promotion, I had to stay 2 years. You had to commit to 2 years. Well, I only had like a year left, so I had to extend another year, which was fine because I waited so long. I wasn't getting out. So I picked up master sergeant. We have what was called the ACM, which is an air contingency MAGTF. And what it is, it's an element out of each of the units, ground units, helicopter units, support element. And they're on standby for a month if something should happen. Well, I got promoted on the 1st of April. By mid-April, the president had sent us to Haiti. And we were there in 24 hours. And that's talking about combat. You know, and it's funny because the entire time you're prepared, you're trained, you know, to do what needs to be done. And that was the first time that I had rounds shot at me. And it was we had been there quite a few months, and it's very nasty down there. Anybody that's ever been there or seen pictures of it is bad. And the rats are the size of cats, and it's 120 degrees, and we lived in a bombed-out aircraft shelter. And but we pretty much we did a lot of damage when we hit the ground. So there was the rest of the time there really wasn't. We set up a fuel depot for the helos. We supported the Canadians. I think the French were down there, as well as our Marines. Then we brought a 46 squadron in, and the Hueys left, and we still supported them. And I'll say this because this sticks out in my head. I was a acting sergeant major for the air element, and we hadn't had anything but MREs and hot water for 4 or 5 months. We had all the water you could drink, but it was 120 degrees. There's no refrigerator or anything. So you washed your clothes in a rubber bag that you put your sleeping bag in, woolly peat bag we called it. You throw a couple stones in there. You throw your dirty laundry in there. Throw some soap in, some non-potable water, and then you just shake the daylights out of it. Drain it out, rinse it again, drain it out. Then you hang them up on comm wire. We made homemade clothes poles and whatever you could do, because your stuff would start to literally fall off. Your camis would rot right off of you after that many months down there. And but one thing I will tell that sticks out in my mind: the Canadian infantry was getting ready to pull out. Things were calmed down. The sergeant major from the infantry, myself, my CO, we were all invited to the steak dinner at an abandoned tennis court, is what it ended up being, a tennis court area somewhere in Haiti, Port-au-Prince, which I kind of felt guilty because my guys were eating MREs, and I'm a firm believer, take care of your troops first. But this was protocol, I had to go. So I get there, had a steak and a potato, and they had all kinds of bread, French bread, Italian bread. Well, the helicopter got ready to take off with the Canadians, and they had to cut all the lights off on the tennis courts, so they could see with their night vision goggles. And the minute they cut them lights off, I grabbed every loaf of bread I could get my hands on and stuck it in the back of the vehicle, big loaves of French bread, because we hadn't had anything like that. And I got back to the hangar that night, and it was late. And I turned all the lights on in the hangar and called everybody, get up out of the rack. And they all got up, and I said, here you go, boys, help yourself. And I had about 100, maybe 200 Marines there. And it was like a feeding frenzy because we hadn't had bread or meat, real meat. And I didn't get them any meat, but I felt bad. So I made sure that they all got a big chunk of bread to eat at least. And we ended up staying there about another 3 or 4 months. And then after that was over, I think we came back in September. that was over. Then I was down to my last 18 months, I think, and my retirement got approved. I had now, because I was a senior enlisted in the command, anytime the sergeant major had business or took leave or anything, I got the call. So a lot of the last of my tour was filling in as the sergeant major of the command, which, I mean, literally, sergeant major called me up and asked me. I said, without a doubt, I'll do it in a heartbeat because, one, I respected the sergeant major. Two, I know I could do the job. Because as a drill instructor, there isn't a thing that you don't experience. I mean, good and bad. There's a lot of bad stuff, I don't like to admit, but you have to know how to handle it and handle it tactfully. Because now your boss is the commanding officer. So you have to filter out what you're going to talk to him about and what does he necessarily need to know or that I can handle myself. And trust me, it was a revolving door. I mean, especially on a Monday morning after a weekend. You always had issues, and you had to do enlistment approvals and stuff like that. So as it got time, my retirement came up, and I retired in February 28th, 2006, after 21 years of active duty. So I'd have to say that pretty much wraps up what I have to say. I would like to say, if I had the chance to do it over again, I would do it all over again in a heartbeat. There's nothing I would not do. I think I can remember I was a PFC or private, and they were calling me lifer. Lifer's a term you don't hear too much anymore, but when I was in, that meant you were going to stay in, your career. Well, I never really thought I was going to stay in after the 4 years. But the first 4 years it was motivating. I liked it. I'm ready for another challenge, and it just kept going for me. And I highly recommend, to this day, I used to be very biased, Marine Corps-wise, about what branch you join. But to be honest with you, the service was the best thing for me, and any branch of the service. I think you're doing the country a great thing by giving up some time in your life and learning discipline, learning a trade, meeting great people, seeing different countries. I mean, there used to be a poster in the post office, I can remember. See the world, join the Marines, see the world. Well, I believed in that. I still do. I mean, it was a great thing for me, and I loved every minute of it. I didn't like coming home because saying goodbyes was the hardest part. That's hard to get through to people that they understand. So